Hey everyone, back again. Actually back the same day. I'm recording this the same day that I record my season 1 review for The Dragon Prince because I basically just binged the entire second season. So that should give you a little hint on my opinion on this one, but let's go ahead and talk about some of the positives that I really found in the second season. So, generally speaking, I mean, I don't find this as much in TV shows as I do in books, but a lot of times the sequel piece is usually a little bit more. I mean, it does happen in TV shows sometimes too, but it's a little bit more of a drag because they kind of writers kind of took all they had and really really worked on the first book, and then they're kind of like, okay, I know I want to do more, but they're not really sure how to connect the solid piece of the first book further because they haven't done any setup in the first book for the future. They've just focused on that first book. Um, this show, I mean, this show doesn't do that. I think they likely already had the entirety of the story written out from start to finish, and they're just filling it in as they go with the seasons. Um, and part of that, I think, is just the way they set up the structure. You can kind of tell just by the way season 1 ended and the way this season ends as well. There's a lot of clear setup. Like, it's almost pausing, like mid. It's not like it's a cliffhanger, but it's not like a conclusion. So it's almost like the way I found it is it's more like these feel like a chapter in a book rather than an entire season. They're like an entire book that's told in through an entire season. They kind of feel like their own little chapters, and each one progresses into the next. Um, One thing I forgot to mention that, and part of this was my fault because I didn't put down a bunch of notes. Um, that I forgot to mention in the last season was the representation in this show. I think this show does a really good job of portraying people of varying uh, backgrounds and um, just different abilities, and I really like that. Especially one of the side characters, which is their aunt, who, well, we learned this season she is deaf and mute, or maybe just deaf. Um, but she signs everything, and I found that super interesting and really intriguing. And I really like that they are reaching out to do those types of things in this show. Um, this season in particular, I thought did an amazing job of diving deeper into the magic system, and I think we'll get more of that moving forward. I know season 3 is already out, but I haven't watched that yet. I like to do these before I watch the next season, so I don't have that knowledge going into the review. But as Callum continues to grow in his magical power, I think that we will also get to see more depth in the magic world, and I'm not sure if he'll gain everything, but he will become more powerful. But I partially, I kind of want him to gain access to all the magics because I'm really interested to see, because really all we've seen is Moon and like the dark magic, which is just magic taken from creatures and things that have magic in them, and then um, the sky magic, and that's pretty much it so far. So I'm excited to see more of these other types of magics that have been mentioned but not really shown yet. One thing that, and I was kind of expecting this with this show, and it kind of ties back to my and what I've heard of assessments to Avatar: The Last Airbender. This show deals with some heavy topics. I mean, this season definitely dealt with like death, dealing with the death of the father for the two princes, destiny, responsibility that they have, and they have to their people as princes. And I mean, I think that's really portrayed through Ez in this season, and I really like that. And I think like dealing with topics like that in a what I would say is marketed as a kids show is really really good. And those are the types of things that make shows persist and like go on past just this is a kid show. It's the same way with Avatar: The Last Airbender. Like the reason that show is so popular is because it takes these complex issues, and yes, it does break them down a little bit, but it treats them as complex issues, and it really does a great job of taking these themes and really getting at the heart of them throughout the entirety of the show. But I'm not talking about that. We'll get to that at some point. One thing that I'll talk about the world building first. I really liked them tying in the other human kingdoms in this one. I know it's just a brief glance, but it is something that's I think is really important, especially moving forward. I don't think they're going to ever be like main players in the stage because I don't think you need to go that expansive. But who knows? I mean, I don't know how many seasons they're planning on doing. I'd imagine 6 since there's 6 magics, but I think it's going to mostly focus around, you know, the elves and the human kingdom where our characters are from. But I also really liked getting the backstory of like some of how this all happened, and like a few, like we're getting the pieces of the build up to where we're at currently, and I think those are important pieces to get. And it's also nice because then we get to see characters who, like, we got to see their mother, who I don't think we've seen in season 1, so that was nice. And bringing back their father, the king, I thought was really cool because then, like, because we only got a brief glance, and it's nice to get these flashbacks because then we get more characterization and we kind of get to learn more about these people who are no longer around but how they've played a part in the story up till now and who they were. I really liked the subversion of the trope with Callum and Claudia, because there's this trope that's used a lot, and it's not just in kid shows, but I think I've seen it specifically in like a little bit younger shows or like YA quite a bit more, which is when the main guy falls for the bad girl and she's just manipulating him and using him and stuff like that. And like Claudia is not great. Like she definitely has moral gray areas there for sure. Especially with the magic and what we saw this season with her brother and stuff. But like their affection for each other is genuine, and she's not using it to manipulate him, or, you know, she's not using his feelings to control him, even though they're kind of on opposite sides of this struggle. And I think that was it was really cool to see, because doing the same thing every time is just boring, and it's also cool to subvert these tropes, but it's also just interesting to see this relationship it's not one-sided, and I liked that a lot. Critiques, not gonna be a whole lot. I'm really enjoying this show. Again, when you've got so few episodes, it's much easier to make them perfect. Well, I wouldn't say perfect, but to make them better, to make them cleaner. And since there's only 9 episodes a season, if they're only releasing 9 episodes a year and they're 20-minute episodes, basically, like, that's a lot easier to tell that kind of story rather than expanding on like a 20 episode a year season, because then you lose. You only have so much you can work on and so much you can edit and revise prior to just going for it. But I guess my one thing is that these seasons to me feel a little too short. I kind of expressed this already. They kind of feel like a chapter rather than a book. And I generally think that having a season feel like an entire book feels just better watching, because at the end of the season, the audience is satisfied and they don't, like, they might want more, but there's a conclusion. And there are like pieces that kind of conclude within each season a little bit, but they're mostly just to the characters moving on to the next stage of their journey. And so like if I'm kind of glad I didn't start I'm like actually kind of like sad that I only have one more season to go right now. But you know, I'm kind of glad I have 3 seasons to work with, because if I would have gotten to the end of the one, I would have been so like, I need to know what happens next, because that's just how I am. So I can't imagine people who started watching this on season 1. Like, I feel like this is definitely a show that, and I know they couldn't really do this because they do need more than just a season to tell the whole story, so they needed to split it up into seasons. But I just feel like this is a show that you're gonna want to watch all at once, because there's just so many pieces that I feel like you might remember, but you could also, like, it'd be a little bit harder to, like, oh yeah, like there's a lot of callbacks in this season 2 to season 1, and those pieces, after a year's gone by and you've watched or read other stuff, those are sometimes hard to pick up on. So but that's probably my only critique for this show. And honestly, like, again, I'd rather a show go short and do a very good job with an episode than go long and drag out the show with fluff and just poorly edited writing, because that does happen a lot, especially in shows that try to shoot that traditional like 20 plus episodes a year. You just don't, there's just not enough time. You don't give the team enough time to really build the story that they want to tell. You're more worried about just producing rather than actually making great content. So but honestly, yeah, if you're into, like, again, if you're into Avatar: The Last Airbender, check this show out. I think it's definitely would be up the same alley. And if you're looking for something, you know, fun and not super dark and serious to kind of break up other stuff you're reading or watching or stuff like that, I mean, this is a good show. It's nice and short, and it's something easy to kind of mix in if you need a break from some kind of longer type shows and stuff like that. So that's going to be it for this review, everyone. I really appreciate anyone who watches. Thank you very much. If you could hit the like and subscribe button, that helps out the channel a bunch, and I really appreciate it. And then, of course, as always, if you have any differing opinions or you want to discuss anything, or I didn't talk about something that you want to talk about, post it in the comments down below. I'm more than happy to talk about it, and I love getting other people's thoughts on these types of things. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.